The Galactic Council had always underestimated humanity. When Earth joined the interstellar community 3 decades ago, the various alien species saw them as crude, violent newcomers, useful for their military prowess but lacking the sophistication of older civilizations. The humans proved their worth in the Outer Rim conflicts, their soldiers fighting with a ferocity that both impressed and disturbed their allies. Then, without warning, the veterans went quiet. Commander Zekthara of the Altarian Defense Force first noticed the pattern during a routine diplomatic gathering on Kepler Station. The human veterans who had served in the Rim Wars, battle-hardened soldiers who usually dominated cantina conversations with their war stories, sat in unusual silence. Their eyes held a distant look, as if they were listening to something only they could hear. "Strange behavior even for humans," Zekthara muttered to her aide, watching as Colonel Martinez, a decorated human officer, abruptly left his drink unfinished and walked away mid-conversation. Similar reports began filtering in from across the galaxy. Human veterans were disappearing from their posts, their homes, their lives. Not deserting. Their military records remained spotless, their families unharmed. They simply vanished. The human government claimed ignorance, their officials seeming genuinely baffled by the exodus. The Threnody Empire, ever suspicious of human intentions, demanded answers. Ambassador Veltar personally confronted the human delegation during an emergency council session. "Your warriors abandoned their duties without explanation." Veltar's translator device rendered his clicking speech into standard. "What conspiracy do you breed in the shadows of your primitive world?" Secretary General Chen, representing Earth, spread her hands helplessly. "We're as confused as you are, Ambassador. These men and women served with honor. We have no idea why they've chosen to step away from public life." But Chen's confusion was genuine. Even Earth's intelligence networks couldn't locate the missing veterans. Satellite scans, financial tracking, communication monitoring, everything came up empty. It was as if 10,000 of humanity's most dangerous soldiers had simply ceased to exist. The answer came 6 months later when the hegemony struck. The Vorthak hegemony had been building strength in the galactic periphery for centuries, waiting for the perfect moment to sweep across civilized space. Their timing seemed flawless. The galaxy was at peace, military forces reduced, trade routes unguarded. Their biomechanical ships erupted from the void like a plague, overwhelming defensive lines with shocking speed. Kepler Station fell within hours. The Altarian homeworld followed. The Threnody Empire's vaunted fleet managed barely a day of resistance before their formation broke under the hegemony's relentless assault. Panic spread through the galaxy as refugee ships fled toward the core worlds, carrying tales of entire civilizations consumed by the Vorthak war machine. The Council reconvened on Earth, the only major world the hegemony hadn't yet reached. The assembled delegates were a sorry sight, proud species reduced to desperate refugees, their military leaders defeated and demoralized. "We must evacuate the remaining populations," wheezed Ambassador Veltar, his usually pristine carapace scarred from his homeworld's destruction. "Flee to the outer galaxies until we can rebuild." "Run?" Secretary General Chen raised an eyebrow. "That's not really humanity's style." "Your style?" Zekthara laughed bitterly. "Your entire military vanished months ago. Earth has perhaps 100,000 regular troops remaining. The hegemony brings millions." Chen smiled, an expression that made several delegates uncomfortable. "Zekthara, my friend, you're thinking about this all wrong. Our veterans didn't disappear. They went to work." Before anyone could ask what she meant, the chamber's communication array crackled to life. The main display filled with tactical data, as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Vorthak command ship destroyed in the Rigel system. Cause unknown. Hegemony supply convoy eliminated near Proxima. No survivors. Vorthak reinforcement fleet. Gone. Last transmission mentioned ghosts in the void. Zekthara stared at the display in disbelief. How is this possible? Our intelligence shows no major fleet movements. "That's because you're looking for the wrong thing," Chen explained, pulling up a new set of data. "You're looking for armies. But humans learned something during the Rim Wars that none of you quite grasped. Sometimes the most effective military action isn't about massive fleets or grand battles. Sometimes it's about knowing exactly where to hit, and hitting hard." The display shifted to show a map of Vorthak territory, now peppered with red indicators marking destroyed facilities. Command centers, supply depots, communication relays, shipyards, all the infrastructure that kept a galactic invasion force operational. Our veterans spent 6 months studying your archives, learning everything about the hegemony, Chen continued. They identified every weakness, every critical vulnerability. Then they scattered across the galaxy, positioning themselves for maximum impact. A new voice cut through the communication array. Colonel Martinez, his transmission crackling with background explosions. Package delivered at Vorthak Central Command. Moving to secondary target. Tell the Council we'll be home for dinner. Zekthara felt her legs weaken. They're operating independently? No support, no backup? Each team is self-sufficient, Chen nodded. Small enough to avoid detection, skilled enough to penetrate any defense, and experienced enough to know exactly how much damage they need to cause. She gestured toward the display, where more red indicators appeared by the minute. The hegemony built their strategy around overwhelming force, but they never planned for an enemy that could strike everywhere at once. Over the following days, the Vorthak invasion collapsed like a house of cards. Without their command structure, supply lines, and manufacturing capacity, their vast fleets became isolated, vulnerable targets for the rallying galactic defense forces. The hegemony's seemingly unstoppable war machine ground to a halt, then began retreating toward their home territory. When the last veteran team reported mission complete, the casualty reports were staggering for the enemy. Humanity had lost fewer than 300 personnel, most of them to accidents rather than combat. The Vorthak hegemony, meanwhile, would spend decades rebuilding what the veterans had dismantled in weeks. Ambassador Veltar approached Chen as the emergency session concluded. I owe your species an apology, he said quietly. We thought your warriors had abandoned their duty. Chen shook her head. No abandonment, Ambassador. They just learned to fight smarter. Sometimes the quietest soldiers make the loudest impact. As the delegates departed to rebuild their shattered worlds, word spread throughout the galaxy. Humanity's veterans had gone quiet, but their silence had been the prelude to victory. The galaxy would remember that lesson and hope it never needed to hear those explosions again.